Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's launch of our third annual International Food Security at Illinois Symposium. I'm Alex Winter Nelson, Director of the Office of International Programs, and I'm not holding the mic like I'm supposed to be. It's great to see all of you here, and I should take a moment to also welcome those of you joining us by webcast on 3 continents and requiring this mic. Is the sound working, Courtney? All right. This symposium is part of the International Food Security at Illinois program, a program that exists to try to organize and focus expertise on this campus to address issues of global food security, of ensuring safe, sufficient, nutritious food for all people at all times. If you are interested in these kinds of themes and would like to be aware of related activities in the future or have an opportunity to affect IFC programming, please visit the website, which is indicated on the program, and register as an affiliate, and that way you will get all the information you'd want. This year's symposium is a product of a collaboration between the ACES Office of International Programs, the University of Illinois European Union Center, the Soybean Innovation Lab, and Woods Hole Research Center. Each of these units has made substantive contributions to the program, and they should all be recognized. I recognize them. The College of ACES is a natural home for a larger program on food security, and I also wish to acknowledge the support we've received from the college for this program and other activities on the theme. We are very fortunate to have engaged leadership that enables events like this and many other events. And so I want to turn the podium over to Dean Kim Kidwell, who will make some introductory remarks to launch this symposium on agricultural commercialization in tropical environments. Please join me in welcoming Dean Kidwell.
This contraption is odd to say the least, Alex. But we will speak into it because Peter is making sure that we're doing it. So I'll warm it up for you, Dr. Sanchez. I'm delighted to be here. This is a really special event in so many ways. And when Peter and Alex approached me and talked to me a bit about this, we had an opportunity to talk about what they hope to create in the next day or so. The lineup is fabulous. So what impressed me is the quality of the work that we do here, and in this space in particular, it's quite profound what's going on at University of Illinois. I was really attracted to it when I applied for the position, and to come here and see what's being manifested is just truly remarkable. So we're thrilled that you've taken some time out of your very busy schedules to join us here. You know, a few words about food security. You know, I would argue that starvation is a weapon of mass destruction. And it's one that we can actually address. If we stay in the space of empowering people to feed themselves, if we're innovative, if we're determined and focused on this issue, a lot of good things have happened and will continue to happen. There isn't anybody in this space that isn't concerned about the funding as we move forward for this, but this is one of those things where doing the right thing really matters. And if anybody's been in a developing country where you've either worked there or seen this, you know what hope looks like in a moment of true hardship. It's such a mixed platform to be in these countries and see what's going on. I always remain hopeful when I connect with people and do good things. And so for everybody in the room that took your time to come here and listen to this, you're part of the village that actually can support and empower food security across the globe. So I commend you for being interested, being willing, being curious. We're thrilled, sir, that you've joined us. I'm so happy to see you again and glad that you're here to share some of your wisdom and your experiences with us. But I hope you have a fantastic day as we maneuver through this. And tomorrow when we close this up, we're going to have a very interesting panel with a diverse group of people talking about some of these issues. So don't miss this. This is going to be fabulous. So thanks for coming. I hope we have a great, great experience. And I'm going to hand it back to Alex to introduce our very special speaker.
Thank you, Dean Kidwell. Our keynote speaker is probably known to many of you through his scholarship, his scientific work that includes a highly acclaimed volume on properties and management of soils in the tropics and about 200 other scientific publications. Others of you may have heard his name associated with prestigious awards like the World Food Prize, or elevation to a MacArthur Fellow, or election to the National Academy of Sciences. And some of you may have crossed paths with Pedro Sanchez when he was Director General of the World Agroforestry Center, or when he was Director of the Millennium Villages Project, or Director of the Agricultural and Food Security Center at Columbia University's Earth Institute, or while he was co-chair of the United Nations Millennium Project Hunger Task Force. And maybe you met him when he was here a few years ago at the Institute for Sustainable Energy and Environment Congress, where he was generous enough to come. If you're at all aware of Pedro Sanchez's work, or if you've ever interacted with him, then you understand why I was so very pleased when he agreed to come and participate in this year's symposium. The theme of this symposium is, as I said, agricultural commercialization in tropical environments. And through discussions today and tomorrow, we hope to explore environmental considerations related to use of commercial agriculture as a pathway out of poverty and food insecurity in low-income tropical regions. Given the kind of work that Pedro Sanchez has done on tropical soil science and food insecurity, it'd be hard to imagine a speaker who's better placed to open up this symposium. He's consistently worked to blend knowledge and appreciation for environmental realities with aspirations for achieving inclusive economic development based on the use of natural resources. That is an important space, and a space that we hope to understand better over the next 24 hours or so. I should highlight a few things on the CV that I might have missed. Pedro Sanchez is a research professor of tropical soils at the University of Florida Soil and Water Sciences Department, and a core faculty member of the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems there, where he's been for almost 6 months. He's Professor Emeritus of Soil Science and Forestry at North Carolina State University. He has received honorary Doctor of Science degrees from the Catholic University of Leuven, Guelph University, Ohio State University, North Carolina State University, North Carolina State University, and christened as Odera Akango. He has been anointed chief by the Luo people of Western Kenya. So without further delay, I want to give you Odera Akango to speak on emerging fertilizer chain in Africa.
Thanks so much. That was quite an introduction. Thank you very much, Alex. And it is a great pleasure to be back here. My first foray to the University of Illinois when I was looking for a job after finishing my PhD. I got a job offer, but decided to go to North Carolina State, especially when I interviewed here, it was 30 below. So, but anyway, great admiration for this university, and every time I have the opportunity to come here, I certainly do. I want you to notice also that in all my name there and what I have in my business card, the word director is no longer there. And I am very glad, because I've had that word for many, many years. And now, in my position at Florida, I basically can do what I want, and supported by a tremendous senior vice president of the agriculture and natural resources. So I wanted to talk about this because we're talking about commercial agriculture in tropical environments. One of the biggest issues is how can smallholder farmers go from subsistence agriculture, in some cases from sub-subsistence agriculture, into commercial farmers. And this is, I think we're beginning to see that happening in Africa, and I'll pretty much focus my comments in Africa. But this is one key piece to the puzzle. There'll be other ones that will be discussed throughout the symposium tomorrow. But I think this is one key. So let me see. I need to keep this close to my mouth, I said. First, I'd like to just to emphasize that Africa is huge. You can fit the United States, you can fit China, you can fit about India, and pieces of it there in Europe and so on. but it's full of poor people. So even though it's very rich in natural resources, it's full of poor people. And one of the main biophysical limiting factors, there are many socioeconomic limiting factors, but one of the main limiting factors is soil fertility depletion. Soils of Africa in general, talk about generalizing about a continent of that size, but the soils are generally not bad. There are exceptions of very good and exceptions of very bad, but generally they're quite okay. They just have lost their fertility in terms of things like nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon, organic matter, after decades of taking the nutrients out with harvests and not returning anything back. So it is the main biophysical limiting factor, and just put a couple of quotes there. And there's also very much a link between unhealthy soils and unhealthy people. And from one of our top economists in this business, Chris Barrett from Cornell, that he describes the poverty trap, and I'll quote it here: poor soils results in low yields and low household capital. Low household capital prevents investments in soil nutrients, which is a primary constraint to soil productivity. So this is not our own particular tribe of soil scientists, but it's widely recognized now that this is the case. Unlike the previous Green Revolution led by Norm Borlaug. And to put things in perspective, this is 2005 data, and I want you to remember that because things have changed. But anyway, Sub-Saharan Africa, looking at all cereal yields as an indicator of just about everything else, they average 1 ton per hectare, or 16 bushels to the acre. To say 16 bushels to the acre of corn in the state of Illinois is, it's just incredible. Well, that happens. While Latin America and South and Southeast Asia average 3 tons or 48 bushels, in China, South Africa, 5 tons, 80 bushels, North America, Europe, and Japan, at least 10 tons, over 160 bushels, and we know that yields of corn can be a lot higher in this state as well. But anyway, 1, 3, 5, and 10, and that's kind of an easy job. When you get metric to this, it helps. So our hope is that it'll get to the level of 3 tons, and then eventually 5 tons. And I probably won't see reaching 10 tons, but it's perfectly feasible, and there's plenty of evidence that this does happen. So why? Why all these low yields? Well, there's a major biophysical reason and a major economic reason. The biophysical reason I already explained is soil fertility depletion, and this has been known for decades. And it is a key entry point. Even in the Sahel, which is semi-arid and dry, soil fertility is more important than lack of water. The second is a broken or non-existent value chain in general, and therefore, I think we have to tackle both at the same time. Now, in 2004, then Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, made a call for a 21st century African Green Revolution, saying that the original Asian Green Revolution of Norman Borlaug and many people did not really help Africa. And even though the better varieties were there, the reason was the soil fertility issue that didn't occur in the Punjab or some of these bread baskets in Asia, and then later in Latin America. So he made a call, and when Kofi Annan made calls, people listened. His previous call was to get serious about AIDS, and indeed the world got serious about AIDS, and there's been tremendous effort. So he said, this is a different green revolution. We'll focus on soils, improve seeds, water, but also maternal and child nutrition, and also making markets work for the poor. Markets are not designed to make for the poor. They're designed to make to work for the rich. So how can you make this for the poor? All done according to new now our modern environmental concerns, and together with enabling policy and the necessary politics. That's what Kofi Annan says. Then AGRA, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, was created in 2006, funded by the Gates and Rockefeller Foundation. They decided to give this green revolution an organization that would push it, that would be in the forefront, something that, again, Norman Borlaug didn't have. He did it with 4 or 5 people around. Now, in this one, there is an organization with a budget of about $100 million a year that is pushing this. And in the pushing, we already saw some tipping points. The first one on the top left is better governance happened during that time, not because of the African Green Revolution, just for other reasons it did happen. And we have a series of new presidents and prime ministers, or ministers, like in this case, Dr. Akina Desina, who was Minister of Agriculture of Nigeria when this photo was taken. He's now president of the African Development Bank, the first agricultural, he's an agricultural economist, to be president of the African Development Bank. All his predecessors before were finance ministers. So this was great. We saw this in many countries. Many, by many I mean maybe 12 out of the 49 sub-Saharan African countries. And the ones in which this hasn't happened, not much is happening. So better governance was a tremendous boon, and it's happening. And the second one on the upper right is that the private sector moved in 2006. Again, because Kofi Annan, at a meeting in Davos, he convened all sorts of private sector people and says, you got to move in, you got to join in. And it did happen. And now what we see in AGRA, they have a forum every couple of years, but the one in 2012 that I had the pleasure of going, I saw an organic movement. I saw an amoeba, a group of farmers, farmer leaders, NGOs, businessmen, donors, scientists, government people, together, all doing their different connections and so on, but all after the same goal. Let's have an African Green Revolution. And since then, it's actually getting better and better. Not without problems, of course, but better. The private sector involvement, and now we're talking about commercialization here, it became a key. First, it overcame the allergy from the UN and some governments who were, frankly, allergic to private enterprise, private business. And there's still some of that happening in countries like Ethiopia. But in general, the private sector changed, was able to change in and was welcome. Then that led us, I'm not talking about us in a we sort of way, but the general group, this AGRA organic amoeba of thousands of people working, to have a refined objective, not only to become self-sufficient, but to have the shift from small-scale subsistence farming to farming as a business. To farming as a business. They're the same people, same small holdings, but farming as a business, not farming as a way of surviving. And a new paradigm developed, which is development should be private sector led and government enabled. And now that isn't universally accepted, but it's moving in that direction. It's moving more and more in my direction. And by private sector, I don't mean necessarily the international seed companies. They're part of that, and a good part of that. But all the way from the farmer, who is a private sector person, and all sorts of different kinds of small businesses and so on. So it's not the international private sector, but it's basically the national private sector with significant contributions from the international sector. It's Monsanto here, and DuPont, and many others. So the strategy is to take this in pieces. Let's go from 1 to 3 tons per hectare first, then 3 to 5, and 5 to 10. And now we're in the stage of going from 1 to 3 right now. And when I said cereal yields, the same thing happens with grain legumes, with tubers, with pastures, with livestock. Things like, for example, camel yields are going also from improving by 3 times in some camel milk yields, I'm sorry, also improving by 3 times. So the tripling thing is not only limited to the cereals. Certainly, the grain legumes play huge roles. So I like to use my friend Bashir Jama here to simplify this thing into two legs. Your left leg or your right leg is seeds, improved seeds, high quality seeds, germplasm, and the second one is fertilizer. And show you what happens if you're missing one of these legs. This is good seed, no fertilizer. The farmer who was having this field in Malawi, she could not get fertilizer in time. She had the hybrid seed. Not going to get anything out of that. This is the other side. Bad seed with fertilizers. That's going to lodge. That's not going to produce much. So the thing is to have 2 legs. Good seed and good fertilizer. And this is what we've seen so much now in Africa in the last 10 years. Going from 1 to 3 tons per hectare or more. In this case, the Millennium Village in Saudi, they average now about 4 tons per hectare, a little higher. And this changed everything. This changed the perception of people, the pride of people. Those of you who have been there, and I know I see several faces here who have been there, and see how people look at you with pride now, because I can feed my family and beyond. And now, that's a bad thing. Bad seed, no fertilizer, this is what you get. Essentially zero. And plus erosion and everything else. Now, AGRA has had a very successful seed systems program headed by Joe DeVries there, and with a hat, who's now Senior Vice President and in charge of everything, not only seed. But what he did is train and help develop a bunch of independent seed producers who were able to multiply and develop the seed for their particular region, and so farmers could have access to improve hybrids of maize and many other ones. So this has happened, and it's still happening, and it has to continue to happen. But now, I think Joe was finally convinced that he needed to do the same thing with fertilizers. So here's a fertilizer value chain in which you have the first 3 stages are in white: databases and soil maps, soil testing, recommendations, crop responses, and field verification. They're in the white color because it represents a public sector, mainly research institutions, and is likely to be funded by donors. Now, the 4th link in the chain, blenders, and then the agri dealers, extension, farmers, they are private sector enterprises and likely to be funded by financing from the private sector. So here's the thing, that we not only have to think about how these things go, but who's going to fund them. And AGRA has a good partner in something called AFAP, the African Fertilizer Partnership, something or other story, that is indeed responsible for finding financing and all the financial mechanisms for the blenders, for the agri dealers, for the extension people, and for the farmers. And of course, the last one is feedback. The first link is to put together the databases of soil maps, fertilizer response trials. There's a lot of data there, but it's scattered all over the place. And at least the one that is geographically, the data points that are geographically referenced can be used to make maps and get a good idea. Right now, it's just an overwhelming indigestion of data that nobody has summarized it properly. So, and then as a result of that, most countries have a blanket fertilizer recommendation rate for the whole country. For the whole country, there's only one fertilizer recommendation for maize, and there's one fertilizer recommendation for soybeans. You take the nitrogen off the maize recommendation, and that kind of stuff. And it works in the grossest way, but it does increase yields in the grossest yields. Malawi has had a subsidy program of fertilizer and improved seed, and now for 10 years it has more than doubled their national yields of corn, and using this blind fertilizer recommendations. But we should do better than that, of course. And developing soil maps where the responses to individual nutrients are expected. Now, Africa has a great asset, which is called AFSIS, the African Soils Information System, that has developed by now a digital map of soil properties in the non-desert regions of sub-Saharan Africa. That is available on the web, although I have problems always finding it. But basically, it now is putting on layers things like pH and organic matter and mineralogy and exchangeable cation exchange capacity and so on. And so the digital maps are now available, but algorithms are needed to correlate the different methods used, and this is done with spectroscopy, near infrared and infrared spectroscopy, which is a very elegant way of doing things, because you get a wavelength of what the different contents are in a soil, and but it cannot yet detect soil test extractions because the soil tests are an artifact. What we do in soil testing is we wash the soil with a strong acid or a strong base, and what we get in half an hour is expected to be correlated with what the plant will get of that particular nutrient during the whole growing season. It's very empirical. It does work, but it cannot be detected by this. So we hope that there may even be a new generation of soil tests based on spectroscopy, but that's yet to happen. This is a bad map to show you here of soil nutrient deficiencies. This is using a technique I will describe later called SoulDoc kit. But what you see, this is a map of a piece of a district in Malawi, recently made, and just the different colors in the map indicate a situation where you have nitrogen deficiencies, or nitrogen plus phosphorus, or nitrogen plus potassium, or nitrogen plus sulfur, and so on. And what it tells you, what it shows you is the heterogeneity. Just take a look at the different colors. Those are different data points, georeference, and so on. And the fact that it's not like being in the Cerrado, Brazil, where for thousands of hectares you say, well, we need this and this, and most of the time it applies because it's pretty uniform stuff. Smallholder farms are pretty variable. So this is why we need to know where the responses are. and I've been in some farms, some experimental fields in farms in in Tanzania, where one farm was showing a tremendous field response to sulfur and none to potassium, and about a kilometer away, the farm in the same trial was showing a tremendous response to potassium and none to sulfur. By the way, sulfur is extremely important. It's a major limiting nutrient in Africa. So there's something we're using called SoulDoc, and there are many of you here who were practitioners of that. It's an idea of Professor Ray Wild from the University of Maryland, and it's a portable lab in a box, and you see it there. It uses sensors, several sensors there. The first green one is for phosphorus, and that just has one wavelength for phosphorus. Then the red one is for pH, and the other one next to it is for potassium or nitrates, and there's several other ones. But the thing is this: if you send right now, if a farmer in Africa sends a soil sample to the capital for analysis, good luck. First, it's not likely to get there. Second, it might be thrown in a closet. Third, when it's time to analysis, there's no electricity, there's no broadband connectivity, and this is a waste situation. Now you can send to some commercial soil labs that exist in Africa that serve the industries like coffee plantations and tea plantations, that for $50 you can get a sample analyzed in reasonable time. But it's not like here, where if you want to send a soil sample, you already have a box with a barcode in it, and you send it to the lab here at Illinois, and within a couple of days you get an email with a fertilizer recommendation. I assume that's the way it works here. That's the way it works in other states. So if you cannot bring the soil to the lab, how about bringing the lab to the soil? And this is the idea of SoulDoc, using all these miniaturized sensors from other industry. The pH meter comes from the beer industry, the phosphorus sensor comes from the aquarium industry, another one comes from the swimming pool industry, and so on. And Ray Wild put them together cleverly, and you can do this. It doesn't use electricity, it uses batteries. It doesn't use distilled water, it uses bottled water, just like this stuff here, which is available all over Africa, and you just measure the blank and subtract the nutrient content here. That takes care of a couple of problems. Electricity is a problem in the labs, and anybody who's working in a soil lab knows that the water still is the first thing that breaks down. And continuously, I kept getting emails from the head of the soil and water science department I'm in Florida, saying, "Well, the still is not working now. It would work in 8 hours," and blah blah blah. But I mean, just about all the time. So let's get rid of all this stuff and bring all this here. In addition, there are some measurements for something we call biologically active carbon, which is actually an NRCS approved method for soil quality, which gives you an idea of the active part of carbon, of organic matter, that releases nutrients. And it tells you whether you need to add carbon, because none of these fertilizers, of course, are adding carbon. It will develop carbon as with root development and root decomposition and so on, but you need more than that. So there's that, and there's also a simple penetrometer used all over the place to detect. You dig a hole, and with a penetrometer you detect plow pans that can kill you in terms of crop yields. So it has these two additional things that, of course, the labs, the big labs, don't have. It also has an Android smartphone that, in this case, Lydia Gatteri, one of our trainers, is showing to some Zambian scientists. And this goes, it has a program that has in some things, will measure potassium K in the bottled water, potassium in the blank, so on, and change ppms to kilograms per hectare and all that stuff. It's all there, so you can get, this is very simple stuff, but so you can get a recommendation right away, and you send it to the cloud, and or you send it to the specific extension agent already, and it doesn't take any time to do that. So this is an important advance. It's not perfect by any means. There's still some squiggles and some issues to deal with it, but it's basically working okay. And so you can get the soil testing data there. So there, out of that, you get into crop response trials and eventually the recommendations. But the recommendations to whom? Okay, you get the recommendations to farmers, individual farmers. But the domain we're looking at is the Agri Dealer. The Agri Dealer is a bunch of local shops that sell fertilizer, that sell improved seed, that sell irrigation equipment, sell a lot of things. Some of them are very primitive, and some of them are beginning to get quite sophisticated. So, identifying the Agri Dealers in a country, and then the Agri Dealer working area is something of 10 to 30 kilometers radius. And how many farmers are there? You get all that information. Work with the Agri Dealers directly. Now, this SoulDoc kit and this fertilizer recommendations are not worth a darn if there's not a fertilizer blending capacity in the area, because we're dealing basically where you need to put potassium, where you need to put sulfur, dealing with zinc deficiencies and boron and so on. So recommend then to the local blenders, and I'm delighted to tell you that the blending factories are growing in Africa like crazy. All sorts of, and these are all local businesses. So this is a piece of private sector that really we didn't have before, and a key one. So there you can put into reality. They can make the fertilizer that is recommended by the SoulDoc, and then it's usually for maize, certainly in East Africa. But then you vary the rates of the fertilizer recommendations for different crops. For example, soybeans, we say 0 nitrogen also, and that kind of stuff. So that's the third link. The fourth link is the blending plants, and I think I spoke about it. This is one in Minjingo, Tanzania, and they use, in this case, they use local rock phosphate, which is very good, but they import all this other stuff and finance the whole stuff. So having the blending machine and the blending services is great. When I was a high school kid in Cuba, my dad had, and the only fertilizer blending factory in Cuba then, 50-something years ago, still the only one. And before these conveyors and all that went into place, we had to do it by shovel. We mix the fertilizer by shovel. But now, of course, things are better. Then comes the Agri Dealers. In this case, the picture is of a small Agri Dealers. The Agri Dealers need training. They need certification. You are an official Agri Dealer, and that is happening, and they get a diploma on the wall saying, I'm a certified Agri Dealer. And then that certification expires such and such a time. You have to take another course, how you do both the business part of the Agri Dealers and the technical part. And they could be major extension people, because they are at places that are accessible to farmers, very close to farmers. And there are thousands of these Agri Dealers now in Africa. So that network is there. So there are the retailers. There are some larger Agri Dealers that work as wholesalers and sell it to the retailers. But anyway, that's key. Out of this, you could have an extension service with agri dealers, but most of them don't get out of their shops. So here comes the weakest link, extension. Extension services in Africa, the public extension services are mostly very poor and very inefficient. It's not because extension workers lack knowledge. It's what they lack is operational cost. They don't have budget for putting gasoline in the motorcycles or the pickup trucks. They don't have laptops. They don't have a lot of things. Now, once you empower them, like we've done in the Millennium Villages, where we had resources, so they could have the gasoline, they could have the laptop and all that, they go to town, and they really know what they're doing. But the real limiting factor is the budget of the ministries of agriculture there. So some of them may be worth supporting, and I'm talking about financing now, the business part. But in a way, I get a feeling that maybe there's a different model. It's a private extension service run by a lot of these young people in Africa who are college graduates who are driving a taxi in Nairobi, but at the same time playing around with their iPhone, and they're totally hooked up to their iPhones, just like our kids are here. And how about then using this interest and outlook in life of that kind of things to put it together with something that they can do in the field. So there's also a huge problem in Africa with employment of young people. And therefore, the idea is, could this help unemployment of young people by having a cadre of young people like you see here with a SoulDoc and other things, and really be the first commercial private extension workers. This is an idea that is highly debated. I'm coming on the side that let's do the private. In the exceptional case where the public is really working and the budgets of the Ministry of Agriculture are committed, that'd be great, because you already have experienced people there, although maybe a little bit obsolete in knowledge. But okay, so that's number 6. Then the 7th is the farmer. And the farmer uses or needs many things. They need also to get the right message on crops, agronomy, spacing, timing, all this sort of stuff that is neither seed nor fertilizer. Of course, they need the up-to-date cell phone-based fertilizer recommendations, and include the biological active carbon recommendation and ways to eliminate soil compaction, which are easily said than done, but at least if you detect soil compaction. But then the farmers, since they're small and each of them do not produce great quantities of whatever, group themselves into farmer associations. And we've seen this all over Africa happening, and a lot of this has been happening for a long time. Sometimes these farming associations are by crop, sometimes are geographic, but then they can bulk stuff, and they can also store their produce for several months. The produce, for example, maize grain that they want to sell beyond what they need for their own consumption, store it for a while until the prices rise, because at harvest time the prices are the lowest, and then deal with measurements like warehouse receipt, in which the farmer comes to this warehouse owned by the farmers and gets a receipt for so many bags of maize, and then they get an advance on that, so they can buy what they need. Which they say at the end of the harvest, what they need is school uniforms, they need soap, they need basic things like that. So have that going there, and including then an electronic wallet, which is a pretty smart way designed by the current president of the African Development Bank, in which you have a smart card. You can punch it in a bank. Out comes and this is a small farmer. Okay. Out comes whether he owes any money or whether he wants to buy credit for getting the fertilizers and all the stuff, sort of in and out. And the banks at the beginning, they were totally against this because they say these people have no collateral. And banks lending to people that have no collateral, it's just wrong. That's not the way it is. So AGRA came out with the idea of a credit guarantee, saying to the bank, okay, so you're lending a couple of $1 million to the smallholder farmers, to many, many of them. We'll pay you half of whatever you lose, whatever you don't get back. And out of a couple of $1 million worth of loans, AGRA had to pay about $2,000. So most of the smallholder farmers come back, and you can see little old ladies punching in and paying the credit and getting loans. So all these things are beginning to really help. Now here's a cereal bank in which on the right-hand side was the first crop of maize from the Sauri Millennium Village. The price in Kenya shillings per 90 kilo bags, it doesn't matter. But at the farm gate during harvest, August, it was 700 shillings. If you hold that up, store there until April of the next year, the price was double. And that's very, very common. So you obviously double your income and double your profit. Then these warehouses, the farmers, many of them have constructed, made them together. And in this case, you see a supply of fertilizer, a supply of seeds in the tan color bags. And here's a farmer that paid for some and is going out on his motorcycle, or may get credit for some, and becomes also trading post for things like vegetables and honey and fish and all sorts of things that the farmers do. So in other words, the farmers themselves can do a lot of this. And for example, some farmers are no longer growing maize. They grow high-value vegetables, or in the case of this man here, milk. He has 4 or 5 good dairy cows, and he sells milk and buys the maize, his staple food, from his neighbors. So, and this is the ideal, of course. It's not the best way to grow a low-value crop or an extensive crops in a small area. That's best done in large areas. Well, that's not the issue there. But anyway, the farmers that can get out of maize, they're very happy to do so, and they have the money to buy the maize, and then they sell a higher value product such as milk. And also the young people in these areas, around these warehouses and so on, begin to get into local business. I'm not sure you can read that very well, but it says in the middle of a maize field that we recharge cell phones. We fix cell phones. I'm not sure how far they can go into that. But anyway, there are all sorts of businesses, small businesses emerging from that. So the last link is feedback, and feedback, of course, is important. But I think feedback via social media is especially powerful. And social media is alive and well in Africa. So farmers may rate through social media how good the fertilizer recommendations were, good or bad in their own way, and the performance of individual agri dealers, or performance of farmers, or the performance of extension workers. This is a way to put some pressure in the different providers. And of course, crop yield data will be estimated from farmers, plus things like agronomic use efficiency, which I feel is probably the best way to look at fertilizer use, kilograms of grain per kilograms of nutrient fertilizer applied, the economics of it, and so on. So feedback from the farmers is, of course, essential. Now there's been some progress. And the African Fertilizer Summit, convened in June 2006, 11 years ago, Norman Borlaug was, as you would imagine, one of the key speakers, and he made the whole array of people who attended this to have a commitment to increase fertilizer use by country from 8 to 50 kilograms per hectare. This is 50 kilograms per hectare of NPK by 2015. And you know, in the beginning it was only 8, nothing. But now the results: Malawi last year didn't get 50 but got 48. Zambia got 43, while one country that is having less, only 10. Anyway, fertilizer use has increased in spite of everything you can think of, poor roads, corruption, what have you. Still has increased. So here is the fertilizer use with time from 1990 to 2015 in 3 countries. The top 2, Mozambique and Zambia, is increasing rapidly. The top 2 are Malawi and Zambia. The third one down there is Mozambique, and that is increasing, but started at a lower rate. And not unexpectedly, maize yields is correlated with fertilizer use, as you would expect. But one thing is happening now, looking at FAO data for the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. Average cereal yields have increased in the baseline of 1990, which was less than 1.1 ton per hectare, to 1.55. Peanuts in U.S. level things, you know, a 50% increase or so, from 16 to 22 bushels per acre. But it's a beginning. It's a beginning. It's sort of halfway to the 3 tons per hectare gear. So things are happening, and they're not happening in all the countries, as I said. In the poor governed countries, not much is happening. In the Congo, countries that are at war, in Somalia, South Sudan, or ruled by a despot like in Zimbabwe, none of that's happening there. But this is the average of that, and the good ones. It's not only the goodies there, it's everybody. So there are ways to improve efficiency throughout the value chain. Right now we have a low agronomic use efficiency of 15 kilograms of grain per kilogram of nitrogen. It's got to be increased to 25, and I think it can be done. The cereal yield should reach 3 tons per hectare, or their equivalents in grain legumes and so on, the increase. Good agronomy. Sometimes we worry so much about seed and fertilizer and forget the basic agronomy. Planting dates, spacing, seed density, inputs arriving on time, just basic agronomy. Move to high-value crops and livestock products as soon as you can. And then there are things about climate change adaptation, that by increasing yields from 1 to 3 tons per hectare, plant transpiration from soil moisture is double or triple. So there's some sort of a green revolution bonus here, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the issue of organic fertilizers also, and this is something that's been worked by Hope Mickelson here from your faculty when she was our postdoc, and afterwards, and they need financial stimulus for them to go. So climate change is with us in Africa. These are pictures of Mount Kilimanjaro from 1912 to 2006, and it's sad to see Mount Kilimanjaro with a much lower ice cover. Actually pretty disgusting to see this. So, but adaptation, by increasing yields in Africa, can improve water use efficiency, the so-called green water or soil moisture efficiency. And at 1 ton per hectare, in the left here, only 13% of the soil moisture extracted was going through transpiration, and 87% was lost by evaporation. Didn't have soil cover. Now, without an extra drop of soil moisture, If you get 3 tons per hectare and you get good cover, instead of 13% transpiration, you get 63% transpiration. That's what matters. That's what makes biomass. And instead of having 87% evaporation, you get 37% evaporation. Now this, I didn't learn while studying at Cornell, or probably in most advanced institutions in the north. Because what? 3 tons per hectare are ridiculously low numbers that are of no interest to us. So I wasn't taught that, and many of you probably weren't taught this thing either. But but it makes a difference when you're starting from this low point to the high point. It does make a difference. Now, how about organic fertilizers? I've been talking about mineral fertilizers, and of course, the organically inclined people would like to chastise me and say why. I want organic fertilizers because they're a source of carbon, and mineral fertilizers don't have carbon. But in order to produce organic fertilizers, in this case, nitrogen-fixing trees, you need to have better soil fertility. You cannot do that without phosphorus. And in order to have better manure that has high quality, you assume here that the manure that you produce in Illinois is all high quality, and I'm sure it is. But some of the manure produced under very low soil fertility conditions in Africa produce low quality pastures. And when you add that manure to the soil, sometimes it immobilizes nitrogen away from the soil instead of mineralizing nitrogen. So all these organic inputs, we need to get the fertility straight. Then you can grow them. And in the case of improved leguminous fallows, like in this picture here, it captures about 150 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. Plus, it recycles all sorts of nutrients, potassium, micronutrients, and it certainly adds carbons. But guess what? When I was at ICRAF and we were working promoting this nitrogen-fixing trees all over Africa, from the Sahel down to the wetter parts, the data was fantastic. The data was solid. It does work. It does work. It does work. And I was so proud that when I left ICRAF, there were hundreds of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, thousands field trials, demonstration plots, extension plots, and farmers were adopting this. Yay! Came back a couple of years later and talked to the ICRAF man who works on adoption, a tough economist named Steve Fransel, and Steve says, now adoption rate is about 7%. You mean the 93% of those people who were growing this are no longer growing this? That's right. So it took me a while to figure why. And the why is there's no financial stimulus. You need, in some of these organic inputs, you'll have a crop or two, in the case of this improved fallows, which you have to sacrifice. It's a huge opportunity cost. In other ones, even the Phytherbialbida, the famous tree that does wonderful things, it takes about 8 to 10 years for that tree to show its worth in terms of improving crop production. So at the beginning, you need to have some financial stimulus. Obviously, you cannot subsidize it because the cost of seed is very little. So I leave to Dr. Hope Michelson here in your faculty to solve this problem. But I think, and she's working on it. But I think it's a very important one. And this may not apply to grain legumes like peanuts, but certainly to cover crops and to the tall improved fallows. Actually, that 7% that adopted this are doing very well, and they're out of poverty because it worked as we researchers said it would. But the other ones are out of it. So to summarize, I think The Economist magazine in an article on March of last year called it Green Evolution. it's concluded that the farms of Africa are prospering at least thanks to persistence, technology, and decent government. And I think this is exactly what's happening. It's going to be a tough road ahead, but things are up. Thank you very much.
We have questions. We have time for a few questions, and I'm told there's questions from the web, but why don't we see if there's any questions in the room first.
Sure. There is a road, and there is also a role for conservation agriculture in many of these areas. I think it's a matter of what's limiting. Labor, as you say, sometimes is limiting. A lot of the time it's not. But if you're going to use conservation agriculture, the issue comes on herbicides. Herbicides are costly, and we have to get the economics right. Farmers are gradually getting into small tractors, draft animals first. Some of them, like in Ethiopia, everything is draft animals. And small tractors, and even I heard that there's an Uber system in Tanzania that actually rents small tractors. So little by little, I think we're gonna get there. So it doesn't have to be all manual labor, but it will take time, and I welcome the solid things. Now watch out for plow pan formation and a bunch of other things. But yeah, I think mechanization is coming and should come. I don't know, Mark. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, but I haven't heard of any subsidy program from the government. I think they just get their finance whatever they can, but they're obviously they have to be financed. I wish I knew. I'll find out. It's largely due to management. In a field as small as this room, and let's say you have a house here, this part of this area close to the house is going to be a lot more fertile than the area at the other end, because that's where the family drops the ashes and all the organic wastes and so on. So there's quite a bit of heterogeneity, and in that case, of course, what you do is you take a sample here and a sample there. The heterogeneity of soils is of course, I mean, it's more important than, let's say, the Cerrado, Brazil, or huge areas of state of Illinois and these lovely black soils you have here. But but I think my personal opinion is I think is mostly management. Yes. Most of the fertilizer in Africa, unfortunately, is imported. There's some important exceptions. There's some rock phosphate deposits that are very, very good. They don't require anything biogenic, and those are locally available. And there are a few nitrogen fertilizer plants emerging now beyond South Africa. Nigeria is beginning to use its waste natural gas that they flare. It's beginning to use it now to make nitrogen fertilizer. But beyond that, fertilizer has to come from somewhere else, and so there is a value chain there. The piece of a value chain that I didn't mention, the fertilizer is coming imported, or in some cases local, and the financing of that to the blenders also, and then of course financing to the agri dealers. So yeah, the big players are not American. The big players are Europeans, companies like Yara, and OCP, the Moroccan phosphate company, which is the largest phosphorus deposit in the world. So I think I've been urging some of my friends from Mosaic to get involved there, because I think this is going to be the next big thing in fertilizer growth. And I think that they're beginning to listen to that. But I think it's a good chance for American companies also to get involved in it. You get a country like Malawi, that was averaging 0.8 tons per hectare nationally of maize, and had 45% of their people on food aid, largely because of that. Then the subsidy came in, and basically food aid was wiped out. It's now back because of an El Nino situation, so it's vulnerable. It's not there forever. But what do you want to spend your money? You want to spend your money in getting people to use these inputs, or you want to spend it in food aid? I think this is the trade-offs. The fertilizer subsidy were very expensive. In one of the early years, it cost about $78 million US, but the extra maize, the benefits were about 680 million, about 10 times as much. So while subsidies can be a double-edged sword, as you know very well here, because now subsidies are actually an impediment to many things here, and they're politically connected and difficult to get rid of. At the beginning, you have no choice, and we're still at the beginning. The beginning, I don't think you have any choice. You need to subsidize. Now, many of these farmers now are graduating out of subsidies and going into loans. And the present subsidy plan for Malawi for this coming planting season of October is 1/3 of the smallholder farmers will receive, what is it? 1/3 of the smallholder farmers will not receive any subsidy, but will be on cash transfers. I mean, these are people who should be on food aid, no? The other third will receive the subsidy, and the third, which are the farmers that are beginning to get out of maize and growing soybeans or peanuts and so on, then they'll get loans. So it's a difficult thing, but I don't think there's any choice. You cannot have this business of anti-subsidy when people don't have anything. And after a while, yeah, but it's hard. I'm all for composting. I think you should compost whatever you have that is possible to compost, for sure. I'm not sure about the logistics of a composting toilet, but composting, we should use all this organic inputs that we call waste and use it effectively. Absolutely.